Hi, my name is Lisa Griego with Retailabs, and I'm joined here today by the one and only Ricardo Baltazar. Him and I have crossed paths before in the past as it relates to just the world of AI and how AI, that intersectionality between artificial intelligence as well as the retail and consumer goods industry. So hi, Ricardo, how are you doing today?
Hey, Lisa, how's it going? And yeah, I think it's really cool what you guys are doing over at Retailabs, trying to build the next AI operating system. So very, very cool. Something kind of I tackled with over the years, and just kind of seeing the kind of potential around that. So yeah, so it's great chatting with you.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because when you think back to AI, it's not necessarily new. I just think that companies now are starting to use it and play around with it with like science experiments here and there. But I think what people are realizing that it's finally there, and we can use AI to the benefit in terms of driving sales and capitalizing on lost revenue and margin and all of that good stuff. But I think it's interesting, and I'd love to get your take in terms of how you see the evolution of AI, not only in the past, but like where it's going in the future.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And to me, I mean, it's part of a long process. And I have never liked the word AI or artificial intelligence. And I think it's the artificial aspect of it. I've always thought about it in terms of machine intelligence. And as you know, once upon a time, many, many years ago, was a neuroscience scientist, like working in a lab, and studied neuroscience very deeply and have a good understanding of how humans reason and think, and how emotion works, and how they make how logic works. It's like that kind of stuff. So there never seemed to be anything too special about it, like in evolutionary terms. Like, don't get me wrong, the human brain is this like fascinating thing, but like you can get into like the mechanics of it, and it starts to become understandable, like respecting the fact that there's still a lot that we need to know, and that we're still discovering. So machine intelligence just seemed to be kind of part of that trajectory. It's another form of intelligence that we've been trying to kind of emulate our own intelligence with machines, and slowly making progress over that, and all the way back to like the invention of like the first kind of machine neuron, the perceptron, to like where we're at now, with transformer models and new sophisticated architectures for starting to model some of like the human cognitive faculties. And the reality is we're probably going to go further. Like, I'm a big believer that we will get to human-like intelligence, and we'll probably go beyond that and figure out something completely new. So very curious to where that leads. And then an interesting fact, like as a neuroscientist, watching now computer scientists help contribute to that neuroscience work. So is neuroscience contributing to AI work, and now AI work contributing to neuroscience? So it's kind of really interesting connection between the two things.
Yeah, the thing that I find most interesting is people's fear factor of AI. They're scared to use it. They think it's going to be replacing jobs. And like, I think about it a lot of times, and I use the analogy, well, yes, ATMs came about, but when ATMs basically launched, it's not like they got rid of bank tellers across the board. You still needed that type of functionality in the institutions in order to run the day-to-day. But I don't necessarily know if that's the right analogy, but like, frame that. How would we frame that up? What's a good analogy in order to have that discussion?
I mean, that's a big question of our time, with lots of groups of thought and debate. And I think you can break down that question into various kind of lenses. So one of them is like, look at AI as part of the great, the long history of automation. And within that, we've been here before. We've had these existential crises around automation, where it was going to be the end of the world, and on the other side of it, it wasn't. Like, human beings found lots of new and different ways to engage their time and their energy. And what we've seen, I think, is like an explosion in productivity per capita. What any one individual can now do in terms of productivity. And there's all sorts of kind of implications of that on our society and our economy, but it's not new. We've been doing that for a very, very long time. When it comes to the question of like dealing with another intelligence and sentience and all of that kind of thing, we're going to have to figure it out. Although we don't have I don't know when, when sentience will occur in machines. Like really, the leaders in this field are kind of putting, 10 years out as maybe the average kind of number, 5-10 years out. I think the more conservative ones around the kind of the 10-year mark. And we're going to have to figure out what that means for humanity. In our history, in our long history on this planet, there have been times where we did interact with other intelligent species. I think at one time, maybe 5 other intelligent hominid species. And I don't know if the history of that ended all too well. But we're the last ones kind of standing of that group. And yeah, we'll see. I think it's kind of, uncharted territory. It'll be interesting to see where it goes.
I think it's uncharted, but chartered, but there's still like that possibility of like getting a speed to value quickly with the information that's available. Like I look back to my days when I was in corporate, and like a lot of the repetitive tasks that I would have to do on a daily basis just to get an understanding of what's happening with my business. I'd have to wait for Nielsen or IRI reports to load first thing Monday. And when they did, I would then upload my daily shipments into my trackers that I had, because everybody at the company had their own behind the scenes tools. And now I look at it and saying, when the world of just how generative AI works, agentic AI, I could wake up in the morning and know exactly what I would need to do in order to manage my business efficiently, and a point where it would free up so much capacity for me to focus on the strategy. How do I build those joint business plans with my customer now? How do I then take my existing quota and say, okay, can I squeeze a little bit more out of that in order to drive more profitability for our mutual businesses? And I think it just allows more time to build those collaborative relationships that drive the bigger discussions and the bigger breakthroughs from a capability perspective. And I'd just be curious to get your take on how you think that, where you think the puck is going as it relates to just the possibilities.
Yeah, coming back, like that sits kind of more on the productivity automation side of AI that extends all the way back to just the computers and computer science. And this is part of a long arc. We've seen these explosions in capability over the years. In the beginning, it follows that typical kind of innovation trajectory where in the beginning you have like some new technology, people don't really know how to work with it, an ecosystem of tools and methods and kind of arise, people become more familiar with it, and now things that they thought were never possible are now possible, right? And we've been seeing the history of that. Like one of my favorite examples is like the spreadsheet. I like to imagine these like office buildings in the, I don't know, 1930s, 1940s with, like just like filled with people at desks where every person represents like a column or a cell on a spreadsheet. And their job is just to kind of gather information and analyze it and be that cell or that row or that column. So like where we're at today, where we all, own multiple tables and spreadsheets, and now they're kind of, uploaded into databases, and we can do all sorts of things with them, run apps off of them. Whereas like, less than 100 years ago, one person, one cell. And I think we'll start seeing more of that, where it's just, we'll have more of our kind of cognitive capacities being able to be represented or, performed by machines, and as an individual allow us to do so much more. I think we're going to need to see more and more and more and more. And I think it'll allow people to really kind of work at the frontier of where they really want to work. So a lot of those tasks, they're not, they're kind of drudging, not interesting tasks that don't represent like the full potential of what a person can do, that, more focused on creative, analytical, strategic things without having to do some more of the menial tasks required to kind of even get to that, that percentage of time where you're focusing on like problem solving and creativity.
Yeah, I think that that's what excited me so much about Retailabs is the ability that we're at that tip of the spear, right? Where barcodes kind of digitize transactions back in the day. And then you have like these retail media networks that are monetizing data on a daily basis. And then you go through and like look at what we can do where we could digitize decision making on a daily basis. And it's not necessarily a science experiment where our solution would sit on top of all the legacy tech and all of the boatloads of investments that these companies have already invested in. And it's like, hey, we just sit on top of it, right? We can draw APIs to whatever existing systems that you have, or spreadsheets or CSV files, et cetera. Doesn't matter how the data is structured. But the ability that we're able to go through and drive actionable results to help drive real business impact in a relatively short period of time, I think is truly remarkable. And I'd love to get your take in terms of what you think we're doing over here and how you see us kind of leading that charge just across industries based on what you know with other global systems integrators that are out there, different independent software vendors and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's not going to go away is a reliance on really, really good data. But then there's data, and then there's information and understanding of that data, and that's something where I think what you guys are doing with your use of foundational models and AI is fascinating. Where you're starting to extract information out and also encode a lot of that domain expertise in, and taking those repeatable kind of expertise tasks and coding them into the system as context, so that when that data, it's data plus context, which creates that kind of domain expertise, and then being able to apply that at scale, right? So, and I do it in my own life, where I kind of take thought processes as someone who's kind of worked on different things, has certain expertise and preference around certain things, likes to see output a certain way. I don't have to kind of re-engage the memory of like what I think good is every time, because I'm integrating that into agents and AI, and you can do the exact same thing for retail, because there's even certain kind of thinking and analytical tasks that are highly repeatable and can now be encoded within these AI systems today, as today most easily as kind of prompt and context engineering. And then eventually, who knows, maybe our own kind of like digital twins of experts, right? So there's a lot that you can do as well. And one of the interesting things that I'm really love about this is eliminating bias, because we all have our own kind of perspectives on how you do something. So you might have like an entire department of let's say like forecasters, merchandising forecasts that all have their particular take. They look at predictive models a certain way and interpret them a certain way, and then an organization might have their kind of specific style of how they look at things, and it might not match up with like the individuals, right? And there's a lot of value in the spread of those kind of opinions and biases. But like on an individual level, you might kind of have someone that misses out, and then there's a significant performance impact just because they have a specific lens or a bias that was created just through their lived experience of working in that field. Or maybe they're junior, but maybe they're very senior and they have a bias. You can kind of clean away all of that. You can keep all like the good and clean up away all of the cognitive errors that people are susceptible to. And it's interesting that you can kind of resolve those biases, and those biases have material impact on a business. I've seen it time and time again, where people overreact to some kind of like missed prediction that they had 5 years ago, and now they don't want to have that loss aversion again, so they overreact on something, right? So machines don't do that.
Totally. Well, it's interesting that you say that, because hold on, I have to pause for 1 second because of my dog again. What are you doing? He can't decide what he wants to do, in or out. Sorry about that. It's interesting that you say that about bias, because the bias that we as humans automatically have can be detrimental, to your point, or it could be like help override the tools, right? And that's what I love about the Retailabs solution is because the humans remain in control the entire time, right? So, and I say this because when I was on a time when I was at P&G in my previous life, I was working on Amazon, and when working on the Amazon business while at P&G, their forecasting tool had come up with a different forecast saying I only needed X number of thousands of units. And I said, yes, but I know when we run this coupon on top of this, that it normally runs 30 to 40%. You don't have that visibility to it. So we actually need to bump it up even maybe 40 to 50% higher. And I had to override and go get all of these approvals at Amazon in order to approve it. But had I not done that, I would have been out of stock on 90+% of my SKUs during like OND, October, November, December, leading into Black Friday and Cyber Monday, which means that for the first time, like, because we overrode, it was for the first time in the history of both the brands that I was managing that we actually surpassed our competition ever. And so it's like, then that becomes now the new base, right? And then you go through and factor that into the next evolution. But I really like the ability that with our solution, it's not just, okay, we're going to slap some AI on top of whatever tools you existingly have and then walk away. It's like, no, we're going to be reiterating constantly and making sure that it's up to speed and provide that context in order to drive the outcomes that they're looking to achieve, and then look for different scalable opportunities too. So it's interesting that you said that.
Yeah, and like a bunch of different kind of ideas are popping up in my head about that. I mean, the human brain at the end of the day is a really amazing thing. It's evolved to solve specific informational problems very well and in a way that machines can't. And there's a trade-off there. Like, I think the future is that kind of augmented work where we're working with these AIs and kind of filling in each other's gaps. Like AI can AI, machine learning, these kinds of like statistical modeling, they can overcome things that our brains just aren't designed to process really, really well. But they also can work really well with humans in terms of kind of generalizing across situations, kind of connecting those dots, and like working together, they can solve some really interesting business problems, because there's things that our brains can't do. They get tired, they can't parallel lies, they can parallel about a million calculations at once. But now, and that's always kind of been true, but now there's starting to be a bit more of a Venn diagram of like the overlap between cognitive capabilities as well as the ease at which any person can interact with these kinds of tools. It's always kind of been the domain of people that learn computer languages to literally talk in computers. And in the middle, we kind of try to wrangle that by building, user interfaces, graphical user interfaces, and like really kind of made these like concrete processes. And that's kind of the world that we're in, is when you buy one of these big tools, you're locking yourself into a process that they give you. And that's their way of kind of overcoming allowing more someone who isn't like trained in what's happening in the back end to like interact with these systems. And therefore, like if it's great if it's a non-differentiated kind of process or capability, all good. However, if it's a place where it's like your secret sauce as an organization, the thing that you compete on and you're winning with your customers, then maybe you don't want to give away that kind of thing. And I think that's where AI can step in to allow us to work with machines, with machine intelligence in a way that is more in natural language, more flexible, more dynamic, and you're not buying someone else's workflow, right? And then on that point, sometimes like, what happens is you buy a workflow, but then you get like features, it's massively configurable to your specific needs. And then you've probably seen this a ton of times where it's just like, okay, well, now we're in a 3-year implementation to configure it to our process.
And it's still not doing what they said it was going to do.
Right? Like, yeah. So I've seen kind of like it work for a one-to-one, like, before with these systems, you have a one-to-many. You build like a system and then people try to adapt around it. With AI, I see the potential for much more control and kind of customization to the unique needs of your specific business. So.
And that you bring up a good point, because a lot of these, what I'm finding is a lot of these companies that I've worked with before in the past, they have spent so much time and resources hiring their infrastructure in order to basically move all of their data to the cloud, right? And so like making sure all of that was set up like correctly is good to go. And then it's like now they have to upskill that entire organization. Like now that it's there, what are you going to do with it, right? And which lends itself to the fact that some of these companies don't have the investment or the manpower to drive a lot of that contextual learning.
Yeah.
And I was reading this article on the MIT study. You probably read it. You probably already have it memorized and all of that other good stuff. Where it's like companies now are crossing that AI divide, right? Like, why are 95% of the pilots that are out there failing today? You know, like what is driving that? And when I looked at that, I was like, okay, it's failing because a lot of these pilots that are taking place are done in a vacuum. They don't have the approval from the top down. They don't have a lot of the people who actually understand the technology in order to pull the insights out of it to drive those actionable outcomes. The good news is that 5% of those pilots are actually working and they're driving incremental growth. But it's like, how do you close that gap? And I think that's why, like, where Retailabs can help sit right in the middle there in order to help move that. But I love to pick your brain in terms of why you think, like, to get your perspective on that 95%, and then how you think Retailabs is positioned, just based on what you know about us so far. Because you and I have talked about all of the secret stuff that we got going on over here, which I'm super excited for everybody to see and play around with. But
yeah, I mean, I've been working in AI and kind of data science and analytics essentially my whole career. So there's an AI aspect of that, but I've also worked a lot in kind of just general R&D and innovation, working with different technologies and trying to introduce them into different functions within a large organization. And like even kind of like with my time in startups, there's a lot of kind of this. What I saw wasn't really so much specific to AI as the general challenges that exist when you try to introduce any new technology, right? And it kind of reflects a lot of kind of the existing, problems that we see with transformation and change management inside of large corporations. So you can kind of almost insert any kind of major technology. Although there hasn't really been one that with this impactful that has captured the imagination of so many kind of senior level executives as AI. So there was this kind of mad dash to kind of jump in and get traction and get moving. And that's great. Like that energy is fantastic as long as you kind of, you step back and you take a kind of a sober, objective view of what you're doing, right? So you're moving quickly. And some of those technologies aren't fully baked. It's true that technologies require an ecosystem of other kind of components for them to really kind of take off and start to create value. And some of those components are still being built, like things around managing risk and like monitoring and how we plug them in and different methods for how to use them at scale in really safe ways, all the things that risk teams inside of organizations need to kind of check off before things are safe and scalable. All that tooling has kind of been racing up to catch up to some of the really powerful kind of AI capabilities, right? And that's kind of true across the board. But yeah, people jump into things sometimes, and like it's folks on the ground aren't always kind of aware of why they're doing specific things. They get really overinflated expectations. I mean, there wouldn't be a Gartner hype curve if human nature didn't just gravitate towards being very hopeful and assuming everything will go right. So this is just kind of following that curve. I think engineers, like folks on the ground that work with this every day, will see the trajectory more as kind of just like linear in terms of the value and adoption. Thinking that it would work right out of box is just kind of like magical thinking that we should have learned to avoid, over the many years of, technological transformations that we've seen. That, again, that article reads more as like a case for human nature and how corporate, like, organizational behavior works than anything specific about AI. The reality is, like, we're making these big milestones. We're going to continue to make them. LLMs and foundational models are amazing technology. Is that the frontier we're going to end at? No, there's already people kind of pushing the envelope farther in terms of machine intelligence. And right now we're in the phase where we're trying to figure out, well, how do we extract value from LLMs at scale, right? And that's exactly what you guys have been working on. And it's, I think your approach is super impressive, and it directly addresses a lot of the kind of causal elements of what was in this article. So I love your approach.
Sweet. What I'm finding is that there is like the amount of disconnected data that's currently out there right now is still baffling. Like the fact that companies are so incredibly siloed. Like I worked at big corporate, and even when I was at big corporate, like even though we were working on the same mega brand, like we didn't, traditionally they didn't talk to each other. And I said, I don't understand. We sell the same brand. We should be talking all the time, right? But it's so much worse when you just, it doesn't matter where you are. I think the ability to go through with that, to basically have the data connected in order to drive faster outcomes, remove those bottlenecks, and truly have like workflows that are integrated and talking with one another, and just moving outside of the Excel spreadsheets. I think in this future world, it's like beyond, you don't necessarily need the Excel spreadsheets. Even if you have a dashboard now, like we're creating models and tools that we actually can interact with the dashboard. It's like, I call mine Jarvis, but it's like, because I'm a nerd and my stuff, but no, like interacting with my own personal Jarvis to say, oh my God, what happened? And it's like, okay, there was a weather event in Panama that's going to impact your shipments. And oh, by the way, we've already course corrected your pallets going into Walmart, and your event's still going to be transpiring or occurring without a hitch. You're like completely fine. That world and the ability there to know that we're actually this close, if not already delivering it across the board, to me is just so exciting. And I'm so excited for the incoming potential, knowing what I know to be true of being on the forefront of other technologies in the CPG/retail space in my past, and knowing that once again, I have the ability to be on that forefront of that change in terms of how people do their jobs every single day. I think it's super exciting, but I'd love to get your perspective on how you feel that tax, like on current systems by having this disconnected data, disconnected spreadsheets, disconnected everything, has taken its toll on these companies, and like your perspective on just the overall adoption, like what's the time period these companies have to act in order to take advantage of like just how fast other companies are moving and adopting these capabilities and technologies.
Yeah, and I mean, again, you touched on a lot of different kind of like contributing factors that get us to where we are at today, right? And it's part of the story. Is like automation is part of the story, right? So as we move from more manual to more automated tasks within an organization, inevitably, like the amount of kind of people that you need to do any one task goes down. And the more people you have working on one thing, it's more things to coordinate, more potential bottlenecks that you're waiting on in a process. And within that's like how those silos exist, because and then you go cross-functional kind of coordination. Think about how hard it is to coordinate within a team, like imagine across teams. And so I think that's kind of how those silos arise. And I've seen it time and time again where those silos arrives around kind of a specific team functional outcome. And some other team has a team functional, some outcome that might seem aligned, but actually isn't. And then they're not talking, and their activities are not directly contributing to each other. It's just as if you had some sort of hockey team. I'm Canadian, right? So you had like a team, soccer team, hockey team, and your defense has no idea what your offense is doing, right. And the whole thing is going to fall apart, right? And I guess that makes a lot more sense for things like football. Like these two teams need to various teams need to understand what they're all working towards, right? And there have been methods to try to solve that with like OKRs kind of concepts coming out of like the Valley and like trickling down to like how does everything contribute to that. But every step, there's a loss of communication, a loss of coordination, and eventually you just can't get this like rise in complexity. And what ends up happening is, your data is going to look like your organization. If you have like siloed functions and siloed,
Right.
you're going to get siloed data in different systems. And there needs to be, I spent a lot of time just kind of involved in this kind of work where it's just like, you need to almost have this layer that tries to keep bringing everyone back around the same definitions, data governance, right? Like data governance is really important, but it's also kind of like brushing your teeth. You got to do it every day. And it's not, and again, there are people in data governance that love data governance. So it's kind of just my bias, right? But some of it is just doesn't seem like, super glamorous work because you have to go and like chase people to be like, hey, like our data is important. Can you like make sure that you're like keeping it clean and like you're doing all this stuff so that we can do cool stuff in the future and those folks over there can do it. All the folks are like, I'm busy. I got to deliver this quarter. I don't got time. And nice to have. It doesn't sound like I need to do this. And then you're trading off against your future by doing that stuff. Because as we know, like whoever has the best data can really do some powerful things. And that's where I think what you guys are doing with Retailabs and being able to kind of wrap a lot of automation around those tasks that break down the silos that exist in data and extracting meaning, right? So it's no longer just about the data, it's like the semantic meaning of the data, and that can have a lot more kind of perspectives on it that you can kind of enrich with these LLMs and kind of standardize and creating like a organization specific or industry specific language that kind of baselines everything. So it's we're gonna see, you guys are doing is really, really cool. And I think it's at the right time too. It's just starting to overcome some of this stuff. And I'm like competitive pressure is, the highest it's ever been. And I think those companies that can kind of act in this way where they can mobilize their like information will win. So.
Yeah, I think about the amount of breadth of data that is out there from like zero party, that these CPG companies collect, first party data. Then you have third party data. And I remember working at this tech company. It's a small one. You could read it on my profile. But when I would work with customers, they would be like, well, you're so-and-so, you're the one who should be helping me pull all of this data together. And it's like, and knowing where we were back then, we just weren't there yet in order to help them achieve the stuff that now, with how fast these LLMs are being popped up and how these agentic AI agents are like popping up every single day. I mean, all they're doing is creating LLMs on a daily basis. With that contextual layer, it's next level what we're able to achieve. Some of the tools and products that I've seen that like what we're using internally, I'm just like, oh my God, I would have killed to have access to that business value assessment tool while I was at a P&G, because I would be able to go through and have such a meaningful conversation with my buyer at the customers I was supporting and saying, okay, this is the impact for us, but oh, by the way, this is the impact for you. And this is how together we can drive the category sales, right? Because at P&G, we were fortunate enough to be the category captain in a lot of the categories that we played in, but having that information would have just been so much more like efficient on every single day. And it's like, I'm just so excited to see what that potential output could look like. But the ability for us to ingest all of that data and harmonize it in a way to actually have like actionable outcomes is pretty impressive.
Well,
That's gonna look like crazy.
Think about how we do it today, right? Here's a table, and I got to make sure that like I understand all the data quality check marks. I understand where it's coming from. It's like the source of truth. It's clean. It's accurate. Like it doesn't have a lot of gaps. All of that. And then I got to try to do a bunch of things with it to interpret, because I can't extract a lot of meaning out of that, right? So, I have to apply some kind of statistical methodologies, either in the form of, I could just kind of do descriptive stuff where I just, okay, take this column and that, let's just plot it, and I'm going to visualize it. And maybe I can find as a human being, like patterns in these visualizations of these different, trend lines kind of thing. There's all sorts of like errors in doing that. So we take it a step farther and be like, oh, well, there's a lot of features, there's a lot of different dimensions, variables that explain this phenomena. So I'm going to turn it into some kind of model and use that to predict or optimize or whatever the case may be, right? And you're there at that level, and now you have kind of, you're starting to see relationships between things and predictions of things, and those predictions come with probabilities, and you're making decisions on those probabilities. And then there's like the step after that. All that to say that there's like 20 steps between, or whatever the number is, but there's like a whole set of steps and activities between I have data and I can do something, like I have actionable insights. And now you can kind of like, all those steps can be automated more so than they ever could before. And all you get as like the decision maker is, all of those steps are kind of done much faster. And you get the tangible kind of like intelligence at your fingertips that you can make, decisions on, right? Be like, if I had an analysis like this, that I might hand it over to an analyst or a team of folks and like have to wait like a month before I understood what happened, why it happened. And now like the ability to kind of do that instantaneously is incredible. Think about what that does for your business. If you can like mobilize intelligence at the speed that the data is being created, right? That's powerful stuff.
Well, yeah, I mean, even when you look at it from like an image recognition software perspective, you could take a screenshot of your shelf or have like one of your merchandisers take a screenshot of your shelf, and within 24 hours, you have a full report of like what's happening, your OSA, like is your pallet there on time? Is it not? And be able to make real time, that's pretty much as close to real time decision making as possible, that like I would have like gone through like leaps and bounds and jumped through so many hoops to get that information back in the day. It's like, what is the delay? Like we talk about like we've talked about a lot so far, but it seems like even though these companies know that these tools are available, they know that there's benefit there. What do you think is inhibiting the faster adoption, like just across the board? Like we know that AI is not the silver bullet, and the tech has to work for the team, which is like why I think Retailabs, because we have those guided experts and that AI, that the best of the best from an AI perspective and synergies, that we merge those two together in order to help drive these workflows. But like, what do you think is the crux that's stopping the faster tech adoption across the board?
Yeah, I think, again, it's true. I think of a lot related to these technologies, but it's having good data and an infrastructure that can, allow these things to integrate and scale within your an organization. I've had teams kind of build tons of algorithms over the past where we're able to kind of isolate a process and isolate a data source, and maybe we have to build a bunch of kind of custom data pipelines to build something like a POC or a pilot, and that works really well. It's like we get it. Oh yeah, it hits all our business outcomes, fantastic. And then that part is usually not the hardest part. The hardest part in that phase is getting the data typically. But once you do that, like a lot of the for many of the tasks, based on with the sophistication that kind of where things are today versus where the cutting edge is, it's actually kind of like simple, the kind of things that you need to do from a data science AI perspective. So there's the first hump, and you get it. It's creating the value you wanted. It's like knocking it out of the park, and you're just like, oh, it's making things faster, better. I can now do this thing, and there's less errors or whatever the case, whatever that metric was. Then it's the hard step of like, okay, how do I take it from like this kind of like side thing that I got, working really well within this controlled environment, to now I'm going to expose it into the world, right? I'm going to integrate it into my organization. I'm going to connect it into other processes. I'm going to have a lot more people work with it. That's always the tough part, and that's kind of where I've seen a lot of the failure because of a lot of different thing, like stuff inside of the organizations. And but again, these tools allow to overcome some of those problems as well, right? Like you can automate away some of the things that were really difficult, and some of those things are, I bought technology on this cycle, so I gotta I bought this software and I have it for 3 years, so like I get it. You have this, but I bought this, and there's this kind of like sunk cost fallacy, which again, another human bias, right? Like,
Right.
or there is, oh, it's going to cost this much. I get that the ROI is there, but I'm not incentivized inside of my organization to kind of
Right.
like, I don't have it in my budget, and like I'm not incentivized. There's no mechanism for me to like, do that, right? Like, because I gotta
Right.
wait. I'll put it in next year's budget, right?
Right.
Even though like,
Totally.
oh yeah, it's gonna like improve your process by like whatever X version, right? And
Right.
math, and you're like, oh yeah, we should absolutely do this. And then there's still some kind of pragmatic aspects that keep it from integrating. And then sometimes you have like this group of people that really understand this stuff really, really well. And then they're trying to kind of teach it to this other kind of group of people that has been doing it a certain way for a very long time. And they don't struggle understanding it. They have fear around it. There's a lack of trust. I've seen the burden of proof be put way higher on anything that's coming out of like a statistical model or like an AI than we have off of a person, right? Like
Right.
person has they may have biases, they may be junior in their career, they haven't seen they haven't seen what could happen, they don't have a deep expertise, and we're more willing to put trust in a human being. And I don't know the real reasons for that. Maybe it's a liability thing, like if someone
Right.
screws up, there's you can't get an algorithm in trouble, I guess. You can't like
Right.
an algorithm. I don't know. But these are right. Yeah, I get it.
You figure
But, like,
that out yet.
you're right. Like the yet part is interesting because like you can control the behavior of these systems just by giving them really good objective functions, right? Or and like we've been talking about AI, but like what we're really kind of starting to talk about, and you guys are focused on, I know, is agents, right? And then that kind of crystallization of AI into something that is specialized to do a task and working as part of a team to do it. And I find a lot of kind of interesting magic in kind of what orchestrates the behavior of those different agents. And I know you guys are like really, really focused on that. And I think that's kind of where we can overcome some of these traditional challenges that exist, right? But again, it's kind of how do we plug in, how do we integrate in, right? So and a lot of to their credit, a lot of different solution providers are starting to create endpoints that can be connected to various AI systems, right? So I think that's a powerful thing, like the creation of MCP and this idea of tools and the evolution of apps into tools for AI is very interesting as well. So
yeah, what I love about ARI, that our artificial retail intelligence, basically our agentic AI agent that we've created, is not only I'm going to say she, but it could be a he because hi. But not only does ARI basically help drive and remove a lot of those repetitive tasks from a planning and decision perspective, but it's constantly learning and adapting to like the needs of the business. And like once we go through and add that human context to it and say, no, actually, when this happens because of A, B, and C, and then like basically improve that over and over, and basically automating a lot of those processes to date. I mean, what people don't realize is that we at Retailabs have created these intelligent automated workflows that are ready to go essentially out of the box. They're customizable to how a company ABC looks at their data. If you want to tweak it a little bit differently and you manage your trade funds a different way, then how we loaded it, great. You make a quick adjustment. If from a retailer perspective, if you basically look at your merchandising financial planning a little differently, then we can go through and make those adjustments. And it's a very low lift from our perspective, and knowing what we have ready to deploy and ready to go, it makes me super excited because I know what our essential competitors have in their arsenal or in their toolkit, and we are already leaps and bounds ahead of those guys. So I'm actually super excited, and I'd love to get your take in terms of how you feel what we've generated so far in this short, relatively time period that we've been like active, for the most part, because we're a startup. How we compare versus those other legacy players that are out there right now. based on what you've seen so far?
Yeah,
Because
I think
you've been privy to see a peek under the hood in terms of what we got going on, because you're you.
no, it's very cool. And I mean, I had the privilege to kind of work like just as these tools were kind of hitting the market and entering into enterprise. I got the opportunity to kind of work at the cutting edge of things like prompt engineering and retrieval augmented generation and just kind of figuring this stuff out. And it was really fascinating how you can change how you can use these things to kind of very easily change the behavior of a system and start to kind of integrate domain knowledge into these systems in a way that is a lot simpler than having to, for instance, like retrain a model, right? Like if you're retraining a model, that's a very kind of very time and costly, energy intensive exercise to go and kind of like train a model or to recode an application, you know what I mean, like to introduce some new feature. With things like prompt engineering, you can influence the behavior of the system and the agents in a way that seems that's a lot faster. Like you can just kind of change the behavior. That's not without its risks. There's obviously a lot of kind of controls that you need to put around these systems as you do that. And I know you guys are looking at a lot of that as well. But it's kind of just that speed that you can kind of translate action, like instructions and context into a system. And we've all seen it just like in our people's interaction with things like ChatGPT, or if you've gone at more as like building your own agents, you can kind of see immediately impacts on the output of these systems by just kind of changing that context layer. So in terms of that flexibility to change the behavior of a system, I think it's really interesting. It's very different than having to like go in and change all the code, right? You're just kind of saying, okay, try this, like, or you're giving it examples of this is what good looks like. So here's a bunch of samples of like this I want the output to be, and it can extract that from like, hey, here's what good looks like, and it can emulate that, right? So in a way, without you having to like carve out all of the explicit instructions of like, okay, what am I doing in machine language in terms of the instructions that I'm providing the system? I can just provide it in natural language. So I think that's like super powerful. So.
Yeah, it's that NLP that I'm super jazzed about as well, right? Being able to just talk to a system, and it's almost like you would have Ari as your virtual agent on your shoulder and be like, okay, am I reading this correctly? Because what's driving this 30% incremental lift on Walmart today? And then if I'm managing the Target business, I'm going to want to understand and peel that onion back. But even how to manage your businesses on a daily basis would be super impactful. I know I've totally capitalized your time here, but I just want to talk about just like overall within Retailabs, we work with your team. We work with existing technology in your data. Humans are in control throughout the entire process. We are not a rip and replace. We legitimately sit on top of all of your legacy apps and pull data and help feed that outcome. And I think what's super important is throughout all of this, data privacy is key. Like naturally, we're not going to be sharing anything with it. We're completely agnostic as it relates to what everybody has, which I think is like super important as well, especially given all of the different capabilities that are out there. But I definitely am appreciative of your time, and I really look forward to see what's going to be happening in your future, because you almost know about Retailabs better than I do, so we might have to pull you over here in the future.
Well, I mean, I certainly think what you guys are doing is fantastic, and I think the piece is really about obviously these foundational models. They're really great generalists, but they don't necessarily know about your specific industry and your specific company, and the work in terms of getting those powerful engines, like harnessing that and adding the layer on top of that, which is like industry context and then company context, to be able for them to leverage that that intelligence superpower to solve problems inside of your business is fantastic. And even these foundational models, I don't even like to say the word LLM anymore, because it's evolved beyond LLM. So foundational models, and they have more than just kind of LLMs under the hood. Now there's other things. And then there's even people working on new types of models that I think eventually will plug and play into these systems. But that, making it for retail, and the fact that you guys are all just like a group of retail experts that are just like pouring that knowledge into these systems.
Oh, wait, I lost you on that point because it kind of froze. What was that again?
I was saying, the fact that you guys all retail experts, kind of pouring your knowledge these systems, and the same stuff your clients will be able to do as well, is kind of just like pour their secret sauce into these systems, and then just run them at scale, do much more than they were able to do at a speed that they couldn't do before. So
yeah, well, at Retailabs, retail experience meets intelligent action, and I cannot wait to see that's our logo in case you missed that. Retail experience meets intelligent action, but no, like seeing it live working is truly exceptional. I cannot wait to get in the hands of so many people, and we welcome any bake-offs, like regardless of let us prove it, and we could show you a proof of value in less than 12 to 14 weeks, depending on weeks, not months, 12 to 14 weeks, depending on how good your data is structured. And if it's clean, then we could pretty much get a proof of value in a relatively short period of time, which is unheard of. And you don't have to sit there and worry about getting our team up to speed on how your company works, because we've lived it. We are retail experts. We've been in the industry for 20 plus years, some of us. And yeah, I'm just excited to start to move the needle with a lot of the different customers that we're supporting so far. So it'll be great.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me to chat with you. And best of luck. It's really exciting what you guys are doing.
Hey, you'll be following us this entire time, so don't think you're going anywhere, Ricardo. We're in it together. I mean, we are Portuguese, so come on. Us Portuguese people need to stick together.
All right. Well, have an awesome day, and we'll chat soon. Bye.